Hello, my name is Brian, and I work in assistive technology, also known as AT. AT is defined in my world as any device, software, or service that helps people do things in spite of conditions that they cannot control. Over the years, people with disabilities acquired AT in one of two ways. They could hope that able-bodied individuals need something similar, and thus it becomes publicly available in the mainstream. Or they have to get extra funds to purchase or borrow specialty equipment. The more specialized something is, the more expensive you can expect that item to be. And many of the people that have disabilities are not given the high-paying full-time jobs to afford these devices. The Americans with Disabilities Act came along, and with it, we as a society agreed that inclusion of all people in our society is a civil right. The ADA was enacted in 1990, so mostly the laws applied to the physical world. But then, the world went digital, and most people with disabilities found themselves excluded again. Computers require a monitor for sighted people. Text input and output requires the ability to read and type, and typing requires manual dexterity, usually in both hands. And computers require a sound card for people that can hear. Assistive software emerged to help with this, but it almost always put the cost into the person with the disability. The more specialized that software, the more expensive you could expect it to be. Nowadays, we have perfected portable, always online computing devices. And as the world becomes ever increasingly online, the more services and connections people with disabilities need for equitable access. When they can't access them, they remember the ADA. As lawsuits for civil rights violations dramatically increased, the people that make our devices decided they would love to include everyone possible. It makes sense to make money selling useful products instead of getting repeatedly sued for discrimination. And once the developers turned their focus into accessibility, well, then the goal became evident. Everyone gets equitable access, and the only thing they need to know is how. So let's find out. Low vision users can expect 4 difficulties with accessing their device. First is locating the device. Second is navigating the device. Third is seeing the real world. And 4 is color contrast. The key to a universal experience for a lot of users, then, is to make the visual audible. Assuming the phone is on and the settings are correct, a person could locate their phone using voice activation. While many of us use this feature for hands-free driving, voice activation is also essential for people looking for their phones when they cannot see them. On iPhone, you can activate Hey Siri. You can get there by finding the settings icon, going to Siri and search, and enable Listen for Hey Siri. Once enabled, you can ping your device by saying, Hey Siri, find my phone. If you frequently lose your iPhone in larger spaces, you might consider a smartwatch to help ping your lost device. Android users also have voice activation, but they use OK Google. If it's not built into the operating system, you can download the Google Assistant from the Play Store, and then you can find it under Settings, Google, Account Services, Search Assistant and Voice, Voice Match, Enable access with Voice Match. Once enabled, you can ping your device by saying, OK Google, find my phone. The same concept of finding your phone using a smartwatch applies here, but a word of caution. If you're buying an Apple Watch, it's only for Apple products and it will be useless if you have an Android phone. The need for magnification happens to most people over time. In the olden days, people would carry an analog magnifying glass to the grocery store and restaurants. Magnifying glasses are great up to a point, about a 5 power, before the image becomes warped and the lens has to decrease in size to make up for that distortion. Standalone digital magnification can magnify up to 25 power and beyond without distorting the image, but these devices cost a lot of money. Luckily, Apple has made the need to carry a separate magnifying glass unnecessary with its magnification settings. To turn them on, go to Settings, Accessibility, and Zoom, and that will magnify the screen. If you go to Settings, Accessibility, and Magnifier, it turns the camera on the back of the phone into a digital magnifier for print media. You can also adjust the contrast and zoom level using that magnifier and take a quick snapshot because at higher magnifications, your hand is going to appear a little bit shaky. At the time of this recording, I will concede that Android is lagging behind Apple and its magnification features. Android devices require a few more steps to make the adjustments beyond pinch to zoom. You can find magnification settings for Android under Settings, Accessibility, Visibility Enhancements, Magnification. And when that's turned on, triple tapping your screen zooms in on the screen. There are also several other settings under Visibility Enhancements that boost the contrast, the color, and the font of your device. I work with some people who are capital B blind, and no amount of magnification on earth can help them. Assuming the person still has the use of a functioning hand, they can do anything online that anyone else can using VoiceOver. On iDevices, you can find that under Settings, Accessibility, VoiceOver, and what happens is it speaks what is on the screen, and it's navigated using gestures of 1, 2, or 3 fingers swiping in different directions to accomplish different tasks. This is also where your Braille display settings are found, and you can find adjustments for speech rate, verbosity, and voices. Now that we can hear what would be on the screen and navigate the device a little bit, how does a blind person type? If the person can read and write in Braille, they might have a refreshable Braille display. There's a great chance, though, that they might not, because Braille displays are fragile, cumbersome to maintain, and they are expensive. Also, 90% of the American people who are blind cannot read Braille. Fewer than 10% of blind children these days are learning Braille, so a Braille display is extremely specialized. What is common is speaking. The same hands-free feature that we use to activate our phones can be used to navigate your phone as well. In iOS, you can turn on voice control by going to Settings, Accessibility, Voice Control. And instead of gestures, the user can speak commands as well as build custom commands and vocabulary. This is similar to Dragon software on PCs. For Android users, the screen reader can be located under Settings, Accessibility, Screen Reader. And with it, you can change the speech engine depending on the manufacturer, as well as the verbosity. It also allows you to speak your passwords. You can receive haptic feedback. You can sense light. You can read caller IDs out loud, and you can adjust verbosity. Android users also have voice control of their device using the Google Assistant, which, if it didn't come pre-installed on the device, is a free download from the Google Play Store. It's more complicated than iOS in some ways, but it exists. It also works best with other Google apps, such as Notes in Google Keep, being easier to use than in Evernote. So far, we've talked about using our devices to control our devices, but there's still a little bit of the real world around us that blind and low vision users would like to explore, navigate, and understand. Oddly, this is where Microsoft has really stepped up. They created an app called Microsoft Seeing AI. And by pointing the camera at devices, the artificial intelligence can read short text out loud. It can read a whole paper document out loud. If you're at the grocery store and you're holding a can in your hand, if you can find the UPC symbol, using auditory beeping, it helps. But if you can find that UPC symbol, it can actually scan the product and find it in a database and tell you what you're holding. It can identify people, with varying degrees of success. It can identify money, whether you're holding a $1 bill or a $10 bill. It can tell you what color things are. It has pretty good handwriting recognition. It can tell you if the lights are on. It can identify some objects and scenes. And amazingly, they offer this app for free. It's available in the iOS App Store. Alternatively, before that, there was Envision AI, which does a lot of the same features with a slightly older technology. They do ask a fair amount of money for that app, and therefore it is unpopular in the community. Unfortunately, the Seeing AI app has never made it to Android devices as of this time, and they've been in development for years. So if you are an Android user, you are limited to that Envision AI app. They offer 14 days for free, and then 10 items a month are free. Artificial intelligence is improving all the time, but it's not yet perfect. Sometimes you need a human being, and that's where Be My Eyes comes in. It's a free app, and what they do is they use sighted volunteers and company representatives, as well as the user's camera, to make a video call. And the volunteer describes what they're being shown by the user. This is a pretty amazing app. It is subject to connectivity as well as the user's understanding of how the camera works in their device. There aren't that many complaints from the blind community regarding Be My Eyes, but a lot of the volunteers have signed up for the app and found that it is really sparse between calls. Moving on to people with hearing difficulties, we can expect 4 major tasks to be affected by the lack of hearing. The first is device notifications. Second is face-to-face communications. Third is calls, and fourth is videos. The key to a universal experience for a lot of users then is to make the audible visual. The fire department can come to a person's home and install light flashers if they have difficulty hearing audible alarms. And much the same way, your smartphone has visual alert settings. They can be found in iOS under Settings, Accessibility, Audio/Visual, LED Flash for Alerts. This is also where you can find settings for haptic feedback, which is every time a phone call comes in, the phone vibrates. And if you want, you could negotiate a wearable, a smartwatch that would help avoid missing signals and false positives. Android users can find the same features under Settings, Accessibility, Advanced Settings, Flash Notification. And you can set that for the front or the back of the device where the light comes on. It also offers haptic feedback. And again, you can use a wearable to avoid those missed signals and false positives. And Apple Watch doesn't play well with Android devices. Some users need to see what people are saying, and live captioning helps with that. Apple users can turn on live captioning under Settings, Accessibility, Subtitles, and Captioning. You can turn on captions in SDH, which stands for Subtitles for Deaf and Hard of Hearing. Also, there are options for hearing aid pairing, the use of a TTY, a flasher, and mono audio. The same features for Android users can be found under Settings, Accessibility, Hearing Enhancements, Live Transcribe. Also, under Settings, Accessibility, Hearing Enhancements, Subtitle settings, you can build subtitles into recorded videos that come through your phone. Other captioning options include Ava, which is an expensive paid service, but it does allow other people to install the app for free. And what happens is the main user can create a chat room, and all the users around the main user have their device out. And that way, the person is not only getting captions, but they are also finding out who is the speaker. There's another app called Text Here that is cheap on iOS and free on Android that was around before the accessibility features for subtitles came in, and it's kind of established itself. My experience with the deaf community is that a lot of people tend to dislike the live captions due to the delays, the lags, and some of the inaccuracies that they perceive. Unfortunately, at this time, I'm not aware of a built-in feature that captions phone calls in real time, but there is an app called Roger Voice that captions the other side of a phone call with a minimum of delay. It uses that text here engine that we mentioned a minute ago, and the captions for incoming calls are always free. And there is free unlimited use between the app users during business hours on weekdays for up to an hour a month. And there's an hour of use outside of the above time slots available for about $6.60 a month, and unlimited access to Roger Voice is $33.11 per month. You can see, based on that cost, that there is a high demand for this feature to be built into smartphones going forward. Now, some folks might not know this, but American Sign Language is actually a foreign language. It has an entirely different vocabulary, obviously, but also an entirely different grammatical structure than the English language. So for some capital D deaf folks, written English is actually a second language for them. And for those people whose language is ASL, the Federal Communications Commission provides translation services for telecommunication purposes at no cost to the user. And these are called VRS, Video Relay Services. They use your phone's camera or to relay you to a sign language speaker in the presence of a non-sign language speaker. It's generally prepaid by the FCC, and some examples of the service providers include Purple and Sorensen. Purple has recently changed their name because of confusion with a mattress company. VRI, video remote interpreting, generally costs money. The difference is with a video relay service, you're talking to somebody who's not in the room with you. And with video remote interpreting, you're in the room with the person you're trying to communicate with, and the translator is in a device somewhere else. It costs some money, but it is cheaper than bringing in a live interpreter. Moving on to literacy difficulties, a lot of the technology for low vision applies here as it pertains to dictating text and having text read aloud. So you can expect some difficulties producing written in English typing and spelling, as well as input reading the text that comes to them. Speech to text is a feature that can be found on your on-screen keyboard. On iOS, You go to your on-screen keyboard, and just to the left of the space bar, there's a little microphone symbol. And by tapping that button, you turn on the microphone and dictate text, sort of like you would with Dragon. Under Android, the same on-screen keyboard. It's usually above the numbers row, but some people use different on-screen keyboard, and your results may vary. It's really useful for people who experience low vision, have mobility difficulties, and literacy difficulties. And if you're driving, it might spare you a cop citation. Going the other way, there's text-to-speech. This is slightly different from the screen reader that we talked about before, in that the user can select a chunk of text and have that chunk read aloud. People using iOS devices can find this under Settings, Accessibility, Spoken Content, and that unlocks opportunities to speak a selection of text. It can speak what's on the screen. It can give you feedback to what you were typing, and it makes adjustments for voices, the rate of speech, and the pronunciation used. You can also turn on predictive text under Settings, General, Keyboard, Predictive. Predictive text is very useful in that it really helps with people who are really close with the spelling, but not quite there. Android users can find the same feature under Settings, Accessibility, Installed Services. They may need to find the Android Accessibility Suite on Google Play Store if their device is a little bit older. You can also select text to speak, and there's a device application called TalkBack, and it works for longer passages, but it does affect your device control while it's speaking. You just have to let it finish. Before the text-to-speech features were built into device operating systems, there was KNFB Reader. It was and still is about $100. It's available on both iOS and Android, and it does a lot of the same things. It has a voice and a pitch and speed and font and color and spacing adjustments, and it boasts that it is great with multiple columns and pages. Again, your mileage may vary, but it also helps with literacy in that it does highlight the word being spoken in one color, and you can have an option to highlight the sentence in a separate color, and there's Braille support for the blind community. Other optical character recognition programs that work on smartphones and tablets include Office Lens, made by Microsoft for free, which integrates well with other Microsoft apps. There's also Google Translate. It's freely distributed, and it works well if you're desperate. There's an app called Cam Scanner. It's $50 a year as a software as a service model. There's also a lot of the literacy software that you might be aware of on the PC, things like Read and Write Gold and Claro Read and Kurzweil. They might offer companion apps to integrate with what they've already made for their operating systems on the computer. I work a lot with people who have difficulties with memory recall. Generally, one could expect to encounter difficulties with event times and dates, items on lists, and conversations that happened. One trick to help jog one's memory is to have a situation played back in audio, and the sound can trigger the memories. Under iOS, you can find the ability to record voice memos under your extras folder. We actually use that feature quite a lot in my job to ensure that we're hearing accurately what a person's needs being expressed are, and we don't miss any details for the reports that we have to write. Under Android, the audio recording seems to have disappeared as a built-in feature, but there are literally dozens of free and paid apps on the Google Play Store that will record audio and save it onto your device. One word of caution: is that you should always ask permission from the individuals in the room to record. If a person has no definite schedule for something, but they need to remember it, in iOS, Notes is good for information that you need to recall later, such as that shopping list, your passwords, and ideas that come to you to explore during your free time. Some folks remember their recipes there and birthday reminders. Speaking of reminders, there is an app on iOS phones and tablets, and it is called Reminders, and it accesses your calendar and lets you know when and sometimes why to do a task. For Android users, there really isn't a built-in universal notes app anymore. There used to be, but it's gone now. A lot of note-taking applications are freely available on the Google Play Store. The one I like to use most is called Google Keep. It integrates well with the Google Assistant, and it's great for keeping lists. I like mine because it gives you a little check mark next to each item, and you can check them off and uncheck them as you need to. Now, some folks I have dealt with have found these apps complicated, but there are simpler ones on the market available for free. There are also a few other noteworthy apps that can assist with memory recall available for download. OneNote is actually my favorite app, I think. It's actually where I store most of the things that I need to remember. It's kind of a follow-on to an earlier application called Evernote. Both of them, they collect your notes, the articles that you might find, drawings, whatever happens to be on your mind and on your screen, and you can organize them in a way that suits you. There's also an app called CanPlan and a companion app called CanWork. These are unfortunately only available on Apple devices, but they are free. And what these apps do is they take a step-by-step picture of a larger task, and you do have the option to schedule a time for when these tasks need to occur, but then the user would look at the picture, and once they've accomplished that step so that it looks like the picture, they swipe and it moves on to the next step of the task. This is really useful for somebody who has a very limited skill set. Say they need to mop the floors at a very specific time in a school so that the floor is dry before the next change of classes. This app has actually helped a lot of people with that very specific task. My travels in assistive technology have revealed that there is a large part of Oregon that wishes for more help with behaviors. As of right now, there's nothing really built into your phone that can really help you with behavioral difficulties, but there are plenty of free and paid apps depending. Some examples I've included here are Calm, that's the name of the app, and Headspace. Those are good for meditation when your anxiety level is pretty high. There's a lot of apps put out by the VA that help with PTSD as far as tracking how you feel throughout the day and what might trigger certain behaviors in you, and you can use those to work with your therapist. There are also other ones that help with cognitive behavior therapy, where you can document very specific behaviors and when they occur. There are other ones for depression. And if you need a therapist, there's Talkspace. It's fairly cheap, and there's always someone available to talk to if you happen to be a client. And if someone happens to have OCD, there are a couple of apps. One's called Worry Watch, and another one's called No CD. Following along those behavioral lines, there's an occasional need to lock down a device so that the intended user cannot switch out of an app, intentionally or otherwise. And in iOS, it's called guided access. You can find it under Settings, Accessibility, Guided Access. What it does is it locks the device into a single app by triple clicking the home or the side button if there is no more home button for you. And it's usually the only way out of it is if you know the PIN or the password that you set, or wait for the battery to completely drain from the device. Under Android, it's a little harder to get there, but they do have it. It's under Settings, Biometrics and Security, Other Security Settings, PIN Windows. And again, it locks the device to a single app, but you do it by selecting the app from your recent, which is that little triple vertical line on the left side of your home button. I want to wrap this presentation by talking about mobility difficulties. Some device users who cannot use their hands to access the touchscreen on their device need a switch. While I could get a light switch to work, I'm in a different kind of switch. Now, if a person can't use a smartphone with their hands, a Nintendo Switch won't help. I meant a different kind of switch. Ah, yes. It could be a colorful button switch, or it could be a leaf switch that looks a little shocking and somewhat less user-friendly, or any number of switches. My company, Access Technologies, has a variety of them that we demonstrate to help people make the decision for what they can control best. Under your iOS settings, under accessibility, there's switch control. And with it, you can adjust the way that the switch scans the material on the screen. It can adjust for the number of switches a person can use. Some folks use 2 or 3 switches at the same time. It can adjust for the timing. It can tell you what the selection behavior would be, and it can give you sound effects for feedback. Under Android, you find it under Settings, Accessibility, Interaction and Dexterity, and Universal Switch. And in Android, you can adjust the scanning method, the direction, the speed, the timing, the focus, color, and the audio feedback, and as well as what happens when you tap. But what if a person doesn't have a switch? They are expensive. And what if they don't have the control to be able to activate a switch? A high quad might not be able to even so much as wiggle the finger. There used to be an app called Open Sesame, and it cost a lot of money every month to use it, and it was locked to a device. And I'm almost sad to say they don't exist anymore as a paid service. This is because what they did as a service has been replaced by the operating systems for free. And what Open Sesame did, and it did a good job of it, was head tracking. So depending on which direction you move your head, that's the direction you control your device. It's located in Apple devices under the switch control settings. And once you find those, you select head tracking, and it'll run you through a little trainer, and you can actually use your phone without talking and without touching anything. Android actually has them beat here. Under Universal Switch, you add a switch and you use your camera. And the cool thing about the Android version of head tracking is it can track your head movements, it can track your eye movements, or it can track your mouth movements. There are devices out there made by our friends Toby that cost a lot of money for eye tracking, and it's available for free on your device these days. So there you have it. Technology moves pretty fast these days. Every major update to your phone means a new feature has come, or sometimes a favorite feature has gone. If you or your person have difficulty with performing a task on their device, Get in touch with us to learn the latest information. You can email us at info@accesstechnologiesinc.org or give us a call at 503-361-1201. Thank you.